All right, I still got a little bit of COVID left, just a little bit, so you might hear me cough a few times in this video. But Moe Abbassi back at it again, and in today's video we're going to talk about how to stop negative thinking, victimizing, blaming, so that you can essentially achieve your goals and become happier. If you're new to this channel, I basically teach entrepreneurs who make 5 to 6 figures a month how to hit record months by improving their performance. So let's get into this video. Let's start off with why negative thinking happens in the first place. Why do we think negative? Why do we blame ourselves or other people, victimize ourselves or other people? Why do stressful thoughts, anxious thoughts come in? Well, if we take a look at the brain, there's one center of our brain dictated towards pleasure. Now, for anxiety and fear, there are 7 centers of the brain dedicated towards that. Why are we so prone to fear and anxiety? Why are we so prone to negative thinking? Well, if we were able to think more negatively in the past, especially when we were caveman and cavewoman, it actually increased our survival rate. If we always thought positively and if we always thought in an optimistic way, then we were more likely to do things that were risky, which would decrease our chances of survival. So the fact that we were back then cavemen and cavewomen and we were able to think negatively, we thought negatively about what's going to happen in the future based off of the past negative events, it actually allowed us to survive. There was this anxiety management mechanism that allowed us to survive and be fearful of pretty much everything around us. However, this does not help you achieve your goals. This does not help you be a happy person in the 21st century. So how do we overcome this natural wiring? Usually what happens is a positive event will happen or a positive circumstance will happen in your life, or you'll even have a positive thought about something. And naturally, most people will start to think of the negative. It's like, well, it's a positive thing, but this negative thing, and this other negative thing, and this other negative thing, and this other negative thing. And you essentially take a positive thing that happened, a positive circumstance, event, or thought, and immediately turn it negative. However, what most people don't do is they don't go back to positive. They don't think, well, it's negative, but also these positive things. What they'll essentially start to do is they'll feed off of their negative thoughts. So they'll have a negative thought, and then they'll think of another negative thought, and another negative thought. And essentially, they create this negative thought loop where they're just constantly thinking negatively. This rewires the brain to just be a negative thinking machine. So how do we actually overcome this? Why does these things happen? What's the solution? So there's actually a study done that they found out, and they called this the blue dot effect. Essentially what they showed a bunch of participants were a bunch of dots, right? Different colors. You got purple, you got pink, you got blue in there. And essentially at first they showed a bunch of these blue dots. And over time, as it went on, they would ask them, how many blue dots did you see? And so over here there is 5 blue dots, right? Every time they showed them the image, they would have less blue dots shown to them. And they would ask them, how many do you see? And they would say 5. And then they showed less blue dots, and they would say, how many do you see? They would say 5. They showed less blue dots. They would say, how many do you see? 5. How many do you see? 5. How many do you see? 5. Even though there was less blue dots on the page. Why did this happen? Why is this relevant? Well, one, as humans, we like to be committed and consistent to the patterns that we essentially see or feel comfortable with. The reason why this happens is because if we are committed and consistent to a pattern that's already happening, it provides a sense of comfort or provides a sense of level of safety. It's like, well, this is the norm. Let's stick with the norm if this is allowing us to continue to survive. Which means that you don't have fear, you don't have pain, you're not living in suffering. This is very similar to people who have Stockholm syndrome, right? They get kidnapped by someone and all of a sudden they start to fall in love because they realize that if they just stick with the pattern of the person who is actually kidnapping them, they have a higher chance of survival. So why does this happen? Why do we have this blue dot effect? Well, we start to adjust to the situation. So initially we saw 6 blue dots. We adjust to that. Our RAS, which is our reticular activating system, will start to focus on initial pattern that was created in your brain. So this pattern is created in your brain, and you start to make assumptions of what the future is going to look like. Well, there's 6 blue dots. Cool. Next time it shows, there's 6 blue dots. You start to make assumptions that this pattern is going to continue, which then you create an identity from, that this is reality, this is what is real. You start to create thoughts around this reality, which is committed and consistent to the pattern that you see. You start to have emotions to this reality that your brain has created, and all of your actions and behaviors are going to be in alignment to that pattern, that assumption that you've essentially created. So we basically fit the circumstance to the negative perceptions that we have that allows us to be committed and consistent to the patterns that we saw. And essentially, this is why we have this blue dot effect, and we're constantly thinking negatively, even if a positive event happens. Even if something happens, instead of viewing it neutrally and seeing both positive and negative, the reality, the truth, we will always think negatively, victimize, or blame. So, what do we do in this situation? Well, we talked about thoughts, which is usually only negative, right? And we want to get towards truth and neutrality, which is usually negative and positive, seeing the reality of the actual situation. So the solution to this is what I call A and G. First thing is we must accept the situation for what it is, okay? Whether it's a positive event, a positive thought, a negative event, a negative thought, we must accept it for what it is. This is the reality. This is what happened. The next thing is we must see it from a neutral perspective. So we must start to go, well, what's the positive behind this event or circumstance, regardless of whether it's perceived as negative or positive? What are the positives of it? What are also the negatives of it? Okay, we must view the event as the reality of what it is, both positive and both negative. And last but not least, gratitude. Okay, and really just being grateful for the event, for the fact that you're able to experience it, see it, hear it, taste it, whatever it is. This will essentially rewire your brain to start seeing things from the perspective that it should be seen as, which is reality and truth. When I started to implement this, I remember things would happen in my life, whether it was negative or stressful or anxious, and my brain's thoughts would immediately go, yeah, but positive thing, positive thing, positive thing, positive thing. If a positive event happened, my brain would go, yeah, but negative, 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 negative. And so no matter what happened, I was always in a neutral state. And neutrality is essentially being positive. It's essentially feeling good, at peace, at bliss. And so if we can accept the situation that we're in, see it for what it truly is in terms of truth and neutrality, both positive and negative, and feel grateful for the situation, which is essentially a positive, in terms of the emotions that you feel, you'll start to actually rewire your brain to consistently to see events, circumstances, and your thoughts for what they truly are in reality, not what is based off of assumptions that have been created, but what we call the blue dot effect, based off of your RAS, based off of the patterns that you consistently see. This is also why a lot of people who grew up in traumatic homes, they have a ton of traumas, a lot of people who have been part of negative relationships, etc., will start to repeat those patterns in their life, because the pattern was created, the assumption of the future was created based off of the previous pattern, and so your identity, your thoughts, your emotions, your behavior is going to be in alignment with those things. And the only way to actually overcome it is to accept the situation, is to view it from a neutral, logical perspective of like, here's the positives of it, here's the negatives of it. And then to practice the art of gratitude so that you are emotionally other than logically, which is the second step, you're also emotionally raising your state to a higher vibrational scale, which allows you to feel really good and quote unquote positive at all times. So, a lot of stuff covered here. Sorry for being so logical and always bringing in the science and the research and stuff like that. Really, I could have made this answer super short and just put acceptance, neutrality, and gratitude. But I like for you guys to understand the context behind all of these things. So what I want you to do is drop a comment down below on what you learned today, your biggest takeaway, and how you're going to apply this. If you have any questions in regard to this, comment it down below as well, or message me on Instagram, Facebook, whatever you want, and hope to see you soon. Take care.